Eurovision. Eurovision 2024 just finished 2 weeks ago by the time I'm writing the script. As someone who belongs to the queer community and lived in Europe for a long time, this year's Eurovision seems a lot less appealing to me than the previous years. Of course, the controversies that this edition of Eurovision surrounded itself with genuinely brought down the mood a little bit, but mostly there's just not many songs that were exciting to me. Out of all the contestants, I do think the Swiss entry was the best one, but there were not many songs that I personally liked beyond the Croatian and probably the English entry as well. I had no intent on making a video in relation to Eurovision, especially since many great YouTubers have already spoken against Eurovision, criticizing European Broadcast Union (EBU) for their various decisions, and the discussions are genuinely fantastic that I don't think I could add on much more to it. Whether boycotting can achieve anything or individuals should be responsible for not boycotting is also a topic that everyone probably have different answers on, and I by no intent wish to get in an argument about them, especially since Eurovision has already finished. That is until I saw the TikTok where someone posted the comparison between the cheers of audience live and the broadcast version.
And there is actually booing cancelling musical equipment. You could hear the booing. Thank you so much!
At first, it really baffled me as why would you replace the live audio? Israel entry being controversial this year is obvious to an average individual, and the massive protest Israel should not bring surprise to anyone that there are booing sounds during the audience performance. Besides, there are still many people cheering in the stadium, and the booing sound is not as obvious to individuals that does not pay attention. I have to even roll back the video who specifically edited to tell me that the cheer was replaced twice to even hear the booing sound in the first place. But it wasn't the first time similar noises were used on live TV events. Artificial crowd noise is heavily present at most sporting events. The prominent usage was during the middle of the pandemic. To protect the players from getting infected by COVID, most sports, for example football, were played without the usual live audience. However, most of the televised game at the time opted for playing pre-recorded cheers alongside the live footage during broadcast to stimulate the experience as if there were an actual live audience on the field. For the most part, these fake cheer noises seem to be harmless, especially during the COVID times. Most people are conscious about the fact that the noise they hear during these instances are different from what they would during normal times, and at the same time it is not meant for actively pushing for any specific narrative. It is simply just like any other sound effect you would hear on television. However, when it comes to Eurovision, there's almost something sinister about it. For me personally, I do not mind television using these noises to hype up the audience, especially for a concert or performance environment, where good vibes are basically half the key to enjoyment anyway. Furthermore, the television tradition has long included canned laughter and faked audience reactions. There has been very limited moral questioning of their use to guide the audience emotions outside advertisements. Nonetheless, it is hard to ignore the bigger context behind this year's Eurovision and Israel entry, and how that plays into the reasoning to use fake cheers in this instance. If you are living under a rock for the past year, the Eurovision had got a lot of heat for not banning Israel for the active war going on in Palestine, and the Israel entry hurricane has allegedly been a propaganda tool for Israel government to push forward their narrative of being the victim, while actively whitewash their activities in the Gaza Strip. As a result, during the live semi-final performance, parts of the audience decided to boo the Israel performance when it started playing. As previously said, the recorded cheers overshadowed the boos when broadcast to the home television audience, leading to a debate amongst Eurovision fans. It's easy to speculate on the surface reason for replacing the audio. As the model of Eurovision is united by music, it is hard to say that EBU would want anything appearing to be divisive to be spectated, hence the decision to replace the track to reinforce the narrative that music should be uniting. In this way, EBU aimed to reduce negative criticism in the future, but surprisingly, it sparked more controversies instead. While this sentiment may be accurate, it fails to acknowledge the significant effort that Eurovision made for Israel in the most recent contest. Despite rejecting the initial Israel entry due to political content in the lyrics and forcing the entry Hurricane to alter its lyrics several times, the European Broadcasting Union never even considered imposing a complete or partial ban on Israel's participation. In the meantime, EBU has also struck down pro-Palestine protests from other artists, including Ireland artist Bambi Thug's Body Makeup and half-Palestinian Sweden artist Eric Said's traditional Palestinian clothing, all under the name that Eurovision is apolitical. One could also argue in favor of substituting the booing with cheers. These boos are from people who are obviously politically motivated, so replacing them with cheer and flowers is just part of the maintaining Eurovision as an impartial celebration of music. I'm sure random individuals from EBU have thought this argument and thought they were very clever. But is Eurovision truly apolitical? The answer is obvious. No. It's easy to find an example. Only 2 years ago, when the Kalush Orchestra won Eurovision, their song Stefania was a clear protest against Russia's atrocities, a political event in and of itself. In the same year, Russia also cancelled their participation, citing their ongoing atrocities against Ukrainian civilians as the reason. In fact, Eurovision in recent years have never truly been apolitical. In addition to geopolitical issues, there have been political controversies surrounding many other entries. The conservative movement heavily criticized Conchita Wurst's groundbreaking win with the song Rise Like a Phoenix for promoting gender ideology and portraying her as the embodiment of homosexuality and liberal propaganda. Even beyond the entries themselves, the discourse surrounding Eurovision is also frequently political, highlighting democratic values as good against totalitarian rules, creating rules that force countries to adhere to Western liberal values or risk potential disqualification, and directing public discussion to support a unifying narrative rather than a nationalistic one. In fact, even before the cancellation, Russian nationalists have often called for revoking their participation in the contest, citing Eurovision's role in liberal propaganda and its active threat to the proposed Russian rule. The only difference between all the previous instances and now is that nobody really threatened by EBU for being too political, but even remote support for Palestine, including words that in a foreign language and a piece of clothing, is suddenly political. And beyond that, even remote non-support for Israel entry, including the booing sound, should be hidden from the larger public. There could be a more thorough investigation into who had the authority to determine whether something was political or not, but that's kind of off topic. We are here to talk about the fake cheers. These forms of propaganda, though seemingly innocuous and minute, have unfortunately been filling our media for a long period of time. To an untrained individual, it is extremely hard to understand and observe the fakeness even for live broadcasting, let alone the cheers for recorded interviews and video appearances that can be edited heavily. Unsurprisingly, Pudding is another example. He added fake cheers for his annexation celebration after the onset of the Ukraine war, claiming that his supporters were happy for the swift victory and he was able to achieve, even though the live audience is kind of dead in terms of vibes, and most of them are not even supporters, but rather state employees forced to be there. Despite the lies, people continue to show their support for Putin during that period. Therefore, it's unsurprising that Eurovision is attempting to emulate this strategy. By concealing subtle clues from the public, the audience remained in a state of ignorance, enabling them to remain uninformed about their experiences, thus perpetuating the existing propaganda cycle. However, it is also my responsibility to kind of emphasize that the future isn't entirely bleak. The fact that the event has become a major controversy and awareness is spreading around it suggests that perhaps propaganda isn't working as effectively as it once did. In the meantime, as time goes on, this subtle propaganda becomes harder to conceal due to the greater awareness around social issues, meaning that even if people do not notice these subtle signals, it does not necessarily mean they will miss out on the entire story. Before next time, not only take time to think about the news you see, but also the sounds you listen to. You may discover more subtle things you never noticed before.